The cream-colored postcard trembled in my hands, its gold-embossed letters announcing another Davidson family reunion. 3 years had passed since I'd seen any of them, except for my sister Alea's occasional secret visits. I traced my finger over the elaborate script, remembering the last words my father had spat at me. Senseless dreamer, you'll come crawling back when reality hits. I'm Yesenia, and I haven't crawled back yet. The morning sun streamed through my office windows, highlighting the sleek furniture and modern decor of my tech company's headquarters. Below, San Francisco's financial district buzzed with early morning energy. A far cry from the cramped bedroom where I'd started coding at 16, much to my parents' disapproval. Another one of these arrived for you at the old address, Alea said during our weekly video call that evening. Her face flickered on my laptop screen, concern etched in her features. Mom asked if you're coming this time. I leaned back in my chair, studying my sister's expression. What did you tell her? The usual, that I don't know what you're up to these days. She paused, fidgeting with her necklace, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. But Yesenia, things are different now. They talk about you sometimes. Oh? I tried to keep my voice neutral, but my heart quickened. Let me guess. Still calling me the family disappointment? Actually, no. Dad saw your company featured in Tech Weekly. He kept the magazine. The admission hit me like a punch to the gut. I remembered the day I'd told them about my business plan, how I wanted to revolutionize small business accounting software. Mom had laughed, not unkindly, but in that dismissive way that made me feel small. Honey, be realistic. Get your accounting degree. Find a nice stable job like your cousin Michael. You're making a mistake, Dad had added, his voice hard. We didn't put you through college so you could throw it all away on some pipe dream. A knock at my office door pulled me back to the present. Barrett, my business partner, stuck his head in. Board meeting in 5. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I held up the postcard. Family reunion. His eyebrows shot up. The same family that said you'd never make it? The ones who... Yep, those ones. I stood up, straightening my blazer. Alea, I'll call you back later, okay? After ending the call, I followed Barrett down the hallway, our footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floors. You know, he said, sometimes the best revenge is just being successful. This isn't about revenge, I protested, but the words felt hollow. Sure it's not. He grinned, holding the conference room door open. Just like that time you didn't deliberately schedule our IPO announcement on your dad's birthday. I smiled despite myself. That was just convenient timing. Inside, our board members were already seated around the massive table. As I took my place at the head, I couldn't help but think about how different this felt from those family dinners, where my voice was always the last to be heard, if it was heard at all. Later that night, as I stood on my apartment balcony overlooking the city lights, my phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Adeline, the only family member who'd supported my dreams from the start. Your mother called, she wrote. There's more to this reunion than they're letting on. Be prepared, sweetheart. I gripped the railing, remembering the day I'd left home. I'd packed my bags while everyone was at church, leaving only a note. Going to chase my senseless dreams. Don't worry about me crawling back. The city twinkled below, a testament to all the other dreamers who'd refused to give up. My company now employed over 200 people, our software used by thousands of small businesses across the country. The pipe dream had become a multi-million-dollar reality. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Alea. Mom's crying. Dad's locked himself in his study. Please come to the reunion. They need you, even if they won't admit it. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about karma, family, and the fine line between revenge and redemption. Finally, I typed my response. Tell them I'll be there, but this time we play by my rules. The moment I hit send, I knew everything was about to change. Sometimes the universe has a way of bringing things full circle, and I had a feeling this family reunion was going to be very different from the last one. I picked up the postcard again, running my thumb over the date. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I'd face the family that had dismissed my dreams. But this time, I wouldn't be the one seeking validation. I'd be the one giving second chances, if they were willing to earn them. Remember when you used to code in that tiny coffee shop? Barrett laughed, passing me a steaming mug of artisanal coffee in our office kitchen. The owner thought you were writing a novel, Mario's Coffee House. I smiled, inhaling the familiar aroma. He used to give me free refills because he felt sorry for the struggling writer. If only he knew what I was actually building. The memory of those early days felt surreal now. 5 years had passed since I'd sat in that corner booth, surviving on coffee and determination, coding what would become Simple Books, now the fastest-growing small business accounting software in the country. Speaking of the past, Barrett said, his expression turning serious, have you told your family about next week's merger announcement? I shook my head. They'll find out with everyone else, though I doubt they follow tech news that closely. My phone buzzed. Another voicemail from Alea. Third one today. I'd been avoiding her calls since agreeing to attend the reunion, but something in her last text seemed urgent. You should listen to it, Barrett urged. Your sister's different from the rest of them. She actually showed up when we launched. He was right. While my parents had ignored my invitation to our company's launch party 2 years ago, Alea had sneaked in through the back entrance, hugged me tight, and whispered, I always knew you could do it. I pressed play on the voicemail, putting it on speaker. Yesenia, please call me back. It's important. Something's happened with Mom and Dad, and just call me, okay? And don't believe anything Michael tells you. Barrett's eyebrows shot up. Michael? Isn't he that cousin who tried to talk me out of starting the company? Yeah, that's him. I grabbed my jacket. I need to meet Alea. Can you handle the afternoon meetings? Go. He nodded. Family first. I found Alea at our old spot, the botanical gardens where we used to hide when family dinners got too intense. She was pacing near the koi pond, her designer heels clicking against the stone path. Finally, she rushed toward me, her perfectly styled hair disheveled from running her hands through it. I've been trying to reach you all day. I've been busy, I said, then softened at her worried expression. What's wrong? Everything. She collapsed onto a nearby bench. Dad's company is failing. They're on the brink of bankruptcy. Michael's been advising them, but I think he's making things worse. The news shouldn't have affected me, but it did. Despite everything, they were still my parents. How bad is it? Bad enough that Mom's selling her jewelry. Dad's talking about remortgaging the house. Alea's voice cracked. They don't know I'm telling you this. They're too proud. I laughed bitterly. Too proud to ask for help from their senseless dreamer daughter? You don't understand. Alea grabbed my hand. Michael's been feeding them terrible advice, convincing Dad to make risky investments. I think he's doing it on purpose. A memory flashed. Michael at our last family Christmas, his eyes narrowing when Mom bragged about his stable banking job. At least some people in this family understand the value of traditional careers, she'd said, pointedly not looking at me. Why would Michael want to hurt them? I asked, though I was already connecting the dots. Because he's jealous, Alea said quietly. Of you, your success. Everyone in the family talks about you now, even if Mom and Dad won't admit it. Michael hates it. My phone buzzed. A news alert about our upcoming merger. Soon, Simple Books would be worth even more. The timing seemed almost cosmic. There's something else, Alea continued. The family reunion? It wasn't Mom's idea. It was Michael's. He's planning something, Yesenia. I can feel it. I stood up, watching the koi fish swim in lazy circles. Success had been my revenge, but maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe the universe was offering me a chance to do more than just prove them wrong. A chance to protect the very people who'd dismissed me. Tell me everything you know about what Michael's been doing, I said, pulling out my phone to text Barrett. And Alea? Thank you for warning me. She smiled, relief flooding her features. That's what sisters are for. As we walked through the gardens, Alea filling me in on Michael's schemes, I couldn't help but think about karma. My family had once dismissed my dreams as senseless, but those same dreams might now be their only salvation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the responsibility. One more thing, Alea added as we reached my car. Mom's been keeping a folder of every news article about you and your company. She thinks I don't know, but I found it in her bedside drawer. Sometimes revenge isn't about making others suffer. Sometimes it's about being successful enough to help those who once hurt you, whether they deserve it or not. Alea and I sat in my favorite bistro, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. She hadn't touched her salad, instead spreading papers across the table. Bank statements, investment reports, and loan documents. See these transactions? She pointed to a series of numbers. Michael convinced Dad to invest almost everything in these high-risk ventures. They lost 60% in 3 months. I studied the documents, my tech-trained mind spotting patterns. These aren't just bad investments. They're deliberately structured to fail. Michael's steering them toward bankruptcy. That's not even the worst part. Alea lowered her voice. He's been suggesting they take out a second mortgage to invest in some new scheme. Says it's guaranteed to turn everything around. The waiter approached with fresh coffee, and we fell silent until he left. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, remembering how Dad used to pride himself on his business acumen, how he'd lectured me about the foolishness of starting my own company. Does Michael know about the merger? I asked. No, but he keeps asking questions about your company. Weird questions, like who's on your board, what your cash reserves are like. My phone lit up with a text from Barrett. Emergency board meeting called. Michael's name came up. Call me ASAP. Before I could respond, the bistro's door chimed. I looked up to see Michael himself walking in, his expensive suit and practiced smile unchanged since I'd last seen him. What a surprise! He made his way to our table, all charm and confidence. My 2 favorite cousins. Alea's hand trembled as she gathered the papers, but Michael had already seen them. Ah, helping your sister understand the family's situation? He pulled up a chair, uninvited. It's unfortunate, really. Uncle Isaac was too set in his old ways. Wouldn't listen to modern investment advice. Funny. I met his gaze. I remember him being quite open to your advice. Michael's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. We can't all be tech prodigies like you, Yesenia. Some of us have to work in the real world of finance. The real world? I couldn't help but laugh. You mean the world where you orchestrate your uncle's financial ruin? His expression hardened. Careful with accusations like that, cousin. Especially with your company's big announcement coming up. Would be a shame if certain concerns were raised to the SEC. Alea gasped, but I kept my face neutral. Is that a threat, Michael? Just family looking out for family. He stood, adjusting his tie. Speaking of which, I assume you're coming to the reunion? Your parents could really use some support right now. After he left, Alea burst into tears. I'm so sorry, Yesenia. I should have seen what he was doing sooner. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. This isn't your fault, but I need you to tell me everything. When did Michael first start helping with Dad's business? As Alea talked, I texted Barrett. Need background check on Michael. Comprehensive. Also any connections to our competitors. Already on it, he replied. You're not going to like what we found. My phone rang, Mom's number flashing on the screen. I showed it to Alea. Answer it, she urged. Please, they really do need you. I took a deep breath and swiped to accept. Hello, Mom. Yesenia. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. We saw the article about your company in the business journal. Your father. We're very proud? I supplied, the word tasting bitter. Yes. She paused. We were wrong, honey. About so many things. 3 years of silence and now this. Mom, why are you really calling? I heard her take a shaky breath. We need your help. Michael says you're the only one who can, but we understand if you don't want to. I'll be there tomorrow. I cut her off. Have Dad there too. And Mom, don't sign anything else Michael gives you. After hanging up, I looked at Alea. How much do they owe? She showed me another document. The number made me wince. It's not about the money, she said quietly. Michael's after something bigger. He keeps talking about a hostile takeover, about how family businesses should stay in the family. My phone buzzed with another text from Barrett. Michael's been meeting with our biggest competitor. They're planning something for the day of the merger announcement. I stood up, dropping cash on the table for our untouched lunch. Alea, I need you to do something for me. Tell Mom and Dad I'm coming tomorrow with a proposal, but warn them, they might not like my terms. What are you going to do? I grabbed my coat, my mind already racing with plans. I'm going to save our parents. And then I'm going to make Michael regret ever messing with this family. The game he'd started was about to change. Michael thought he could use my family's vulnerability against me. He was about to learn why Forbes had called me the most ruthless innovator under 30. Family drama was about to meet corporate warfare, and I intended to win both battles. The familiar crunch of gravel under my Tesla's tires sent my heart racing as I pulled into my parents' driveway. Their colonial-style house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling around the windows. Dad's prized rose bushes were overgrown, telling their own story of financial distress. Barrett's voice came through my car's speakers. You sure you don't want me there? I need you tracking Michael's movements, I replied, watching my parents emerge onto the front porch. Let me know the moment he makes contact with our competitors. I grabbed my laptop bag and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. Mom moved forward as if to hug me, then stopped herself, settling for an awkward wave. Dad stood rigid, his once proud posture now bearing the weight of failure. You look... Mom's voice cracked. You look successful. Let's go inside, I said, noting the neighbors' curious glances. We have a lot to discuss. The living room was exactly as I'd left it 3 years ago, down to the family photos that carefully excluded any mention of my achievements. I took my old seat at the dining table, opening my laptop while my parents settled across from me. Before we start, Dad cleared his throat. I want to say... Save it, I cut him off, pulling up the documents Alea had shared. Let's talk about how Michael convinced you to invest your retirement fund in shell companies he created. They exchanged shocked looks. Mom's hand flew to her throat. How did you... I'm not that senseless dreamer anymore, Mom. I run a tech company. Finding information is what we do. I turned my laptop around. Michael's been systematically destroying your finances while positioning himself to take over Dad's company for pennies on the dollar. But he's family, Dad protested weakly. He said he was trying to help modernize our approach. By bankrupting you? I pulled up more documents. He's working with TechFin, my biggest competitor. They're planning to acquire your company's client list and contracts after forcing you into bankruptcy. Then they'll use that as leverage against my company during our merger announcement next week. The color drained from Dad's face. I trusted him. We trusted him. Like you trusted in my abilities? The words came out sharper than intended. Or did you only start believing in me after seeing my net worth in Forbes? Mom started crying softly. Dad stared at his hands, weathered from years of building his business from scratch. The same hands that had once slammed the door behind me when I left. How much? I asked. $2 million, Dad whispered, plus the house mortgage. I pulled out a contract from my bag. I'm prepared to help, but on my terms. This is a business proposal, not a loan. They leaned forward as I laid out the details. With each term, their eyes grew wider. You want controlling interest in Dad's company? Mom asked incredulously, along with 3 seats on the board, immediate removal of Michael from any advisory position, and both of you signing an NDA about our merger until it's announced. I met their stunned expressions. In exchange, I'll clear all debts and inject enough capital to modernize operations. That's... Dad struggled for words. Business, I finished. The same business sense you claimed I lacked. I'm offering to save everything you've built, but I won't do it as your daughter begging for approval. I'm doing it as a CEO protecting her interests." The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Finally, Dad reached for a pen. "Isaac, wait." Mom touched his arm. "Yesenia, this feels cold. Colder than telling me I'd never amount to anything? Than dismissing every idea I had because it didn't fit your definition of success?" I stood up, gathering my things. "I'll give you 24 hours to decide. After that, I'll have to explore other options to protect my company from Michael's schemes." As I reached the door, Dad's voice stopped me. "We were wrong." I turned. He looked older, smaller somehow. "We were wrong about everything. Your dreams, your potential. You." "I know," I said quietly. "The question is, what are you going to do about it now?" Mom stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "We'll sign. Not because we have to, but because we trust you. Now, finally." I nodded, my throat tight. "I'll have my lawyers draw up the final papers. And Mom, Dad? Next time Michael comes around, tell him your senseless dreamer of a daughter sends her regards." Walking back to my car, I texted Barrett. "They're in. Start phase 2. His reply came instantly. "Michael just scheduled a meeting with TechFin for tomorrow. Want me to crash it?" I smiled, starting my car. "No. Let him think he's winning. The best revenge needs perfect timing." And timing, like success, was something I'd learned to master. The family dinner was my idea. A power move disguised as reconciliation. I reserved a private room at La Maison, the kind of upscale restaurant my parents could no longer afford. Michael's face when he walked in and saw me at the head of the table was worth every penny. "Cousin." His smile faltered slightly. "I didn't know you'd be joining us." I wouldn't miss it. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "We have so much to catch up on." Elia sat to my right, while Mom and Dad occupied the other side. The tension could have shattered the crystal glasses. "Wine?" I offered, pouring Michael a glass of expensive Bordeaux. "I remember you're quite the connoisseur. Always knew the value of liquid assets." He caught my meaning, his knuckles whitening around the stem of his glass. "Speaking of assets, Uncle Isaac, have you considered my proposal about—" "Actually," Dad interrupted, sitting straighter. "We've decided to go in a different direction. Yesenia has offered to help modernize the company." Michael's fork clattered against his plate. "You can't be serious. She doesn't know anything about running a traditional business. Her little software company is worth more than you could imagine." Aunt Adeline's voice cut through as she swept into the room. I'd invited her as backup, knowing her presence would rattle Michael. She was the family matriarch, and the only one who'd seen through him from the start. "Adeline." Michael stood to kiss her cheek. "I didn't expect—" Clearly. She took the seat beside me. "You haven't expected a lot of things lately, have you? Like how thoroughly some of us can investigate suspicious investment patterns." The waiter arrived with our appetizers, providing a brief reprieve from the mounting tension. I watched Michael's face as he processed the shifting dynamics. "I've only ever acted in the family's best interest," he said smoothly, "unlike some who abandon their parents to chase wild dreams." "Funny thing about dreams," I replied, pulling out my tablet. "Sometimes they help you spot nightmares." I slid the device toward him. "Like these transactions you've been orchestrating. Care to explain them to everyone?" Color drained from his face as he scanned the documents. "Where did you get these?" "The same place TechFin will get them tomorrow morning if you don't back off." I took a sip of wine. "Along with evidence of your insider trading." Mom gasped. Dad reached for her hand under the table. "You're bluffing," Michael hissed, but sweat beaded on his forehead. "Am I?" I pulled up another document. Like I was bluffing about starting a successful company? About making it big in tech? "Face it, cousin. You bet against the wrong horse." Aunt Adeline cleared her throat. "Michael, dear, I think it's time you told everyone about your gambling debts. And why you really needed Uncle Isaac's company to fail." The look of pure shock on his face confirmed everything. My private investigator had been thorough. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but Alea was already pulling out more papers. "Your offshore accounts," she said quietly. "The ones you've been hiding money in. Did you think nobody would notice?" "Enough." Mom's voice cracked through the tension. She turned to Michael, tears in her eyes. "How could you? We trusted you. We chose your advice over our own daughter's success." "Speaking of success," I interjected, "Dad, would you like to tell Michael about our new arrangement?" Dad straightened his shoulders, looking more like his old self than he had in years. "Yesenia's company is acquiring a controlling interest in my business. She's going to help us modernize, expand, and—" He paused, looking at me with newfound respect. "Succeed." Michael shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly. "You can't do this. I have contracts, agreements." "All void as of this morning," I smiled. "Check your email. Our lawyers have been busy." "You'll regret this," he snarled, throwing his napkin down. "All of you." "No, Michael," Aunt Adeline said firmly. "The only regret here is that we didn't see through you sooner. Now, I suggest you leave before Yesenia shares those documents with the SEC." After he stormed out, the tension dissolved into nervous laughter. Mom was crying again, but this time she reached for my hand across the table. "I don't deserve your help," she whispered. "We don't deserve any of this. Maybe not." I squeezed her hand. "But family is family, even when they're wrong, even when they hurt you. Sometimes especially then." Aunt Adeline raised her glass. "To second chances, and to the senseless dreamer who showed us all what dreams can really do." As we clinked glasses, I caught Alea's proud smile. The revenge I'd imagined for so long felt different now. Less like triumph over my family, and more like triumph for them. Sometimes the best revenge isn't serving cold dishes. Sometimes it's serving hope instead. "He's making his move," Barrett announced, bursting into my office early Monday morning. Michael just walked into TechFin's headquarters with a briefcase full of documents. I glanced at my watch. 8:15 a.m., right on schedule. "Did you send the package?" "Delivered to their board 10 minutes ago." He grinned, loosening his tie. "You should see their stock trading pattern. Something big is happening in there." My phone buzzed. "Alea." "Turn on CNBC now." I grabbed the remote, flicking on the wall-mounted TV. The headline scrolling across the bottom made my heart race. "TechFin CEO steps down amid insider trading allegations." "Holy shit," Barrett whispered. "Your plan actually worked." The reporter's voice filled my office. "Sources say the SEC is investigating multiple instances of securities fraud and market manipulation. TechFin's board has called an emergency meeting." My office door flew open again. This time it was Dad, looking more animated than I'd seen him in years. "Did you see? Michael just called me, ranting about how I've ruined everything. What did you do?" "Not here," I said, grabbing my jacket. "Boardroom, now. Barrett, get everyone on the video call." 5 minutes later, we sat around the gleaming conference table, faces of my executive team filling the screens on the wall. Dad looked overwhelmed by the technology surrounding him, but there was something else in his expression. Pride. "Michael didn't just target our family," I began, pulling up documents on the main screen. "He's been running this scheme with multiple companies, destabilizing family-owned businesses, forcing them into bankruptcy, then helping TechFin acquire their assets at pennies on the dollar." "But why?" Dad asked. "He had a good position at the bank, respect in the family. Gambling debts," Barrett explained. "Huge ones. He needed big wins to cover his losses. TechFin promised him a percentage of each acquisition." My phone lit up with a text from Aunt Adeline. "Michael just showed up at your parents' house. He's threatening to expose something about your merger." "Right on cue," I muttered, then addressed the room. "Everyone clear on phase 3? The screens filled with nods. Dad looked confused. "There's more?" "Michael thinks he has leverage over our upcoming merger announcement," I explained. "What he doesn't know is that we've been 10 steps ahead this whole time." My phone rang. Michael's number. I put it on speaker. You think you're so clever. His voice trembled with rage. But I have proof your merger is built on fraudulent numbers. One call to the press and… You mean these numbers? I interrupted, nodding to Barrett, who pressed a button. Every screen filled with documents. The ones you falsified and planted in our system last week? The ones we've been tracking since you first tried to hack our servers? Silence on the other end. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to walk away. From our family, from Dad's company, from everything. Because if you don't, the SEC won't just get proof of your TechFin schemes, they'll get evidence of every illegal trade you've made in the last 5 years. You wouldn't, he hissed. It would hurt the family reputation. Dad stood up, leaning toward the speaker. The family reputation was hurt the moment we chose to believe in you instead of my daughter. No more, Michael. It's over. The line went dead. Barrett's phone pinged. TechFin's board just announced they're pulling out of all pending acquisitions. Their stock is in freefall. And our merger? Dad asked anxiously. I smiled, pulling up one final document. Was never with TechFin. We're merging with their biggest rival. The announcement tomorrow will destroy what's left of their market share. Dad sank back into his chair, shaking his head in amazement. All this time, you weren't just protecting our family business. You were playing chess while Michael played checkers. Barrett finished. That's why she's the CEO. My phone buzzed again. Alia. Michael just left. He looked destroyed. Mom wants to know if you're coming over for dinner tonight. I looked at Dad, seeing him differently now. Not as the man who dismissed my dreams, but as someone who'd learned from his mistakes. Someone who was finally ready to learn from his daughter. Tell Mom yes, I texted back. We have a new business plan to discuss. Yes, Ania. Dad's voice was thick with emotion. I spent years teaching you about business, but it turns out you're the one who had the most to teach me. That's the thing about being a senseless dreamer, I replied, standing to hug him. Sometimes those dreams make more sense than anyone could have imagined. The screens behind us filled with breaking news alerts about TechFin's collapse, but I barely noticed. Sometimes the biggest victories aren't the ones that make headlines. They're the ones that heal what was broken. The merger announcement press conference was set for 10 a.m., but by 9:30, the hotel ballroom was already packed. I stood backstage, watching through a gap in the curtains as reporters and industry analysts filed in. Mom, Dad, and Alea sat in the front row, looking both nervous and proud. Ready to make history. Barrett appeared beside me, adjusting his tie. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't do this. Michael's voice was desperate. I can offer you a better deal. TechFin's board is probably looking for a new patsy right about now. I cut him off. Goodbye, Michael. You've ruined me, he shouted. After everything this family… I ended the call as Aunt Adeline approached, elegant as ever in her designer suit. He's not giving up, is he? He just made his last mistake. I showed her the call log. Trying to interfere with a merger announcement? The SEC will love this recording. The lights dimmed, signaling it was time. As I stepped onto the stage, camera flashes erupted like lightning. I caught Mom wiping tears from her eyes, Dad squeezing her hand. Good morning, I began, my voice steady. Today, Simple Books isn't just announcing a merger. We're announcing a revolution in how family businesses can thrive in the digital age. The screens behind me lit up with our new company logo. Gasps rippled through the audience as they realized what they were seeing. By combining Simple Books technology with 23 family-owned businesses across the country, including my father's company, we're creating the largest network of modernized traditional businesses in America. Cameras clicked frantically as I continued. Every company Michael targeted, every family business he tried to destroy, they're all here today, joining forces under one digital umbrella. The side door burst open. Michael stormed in, his suit disheveled. This is a fraud. She's lying about… 2 security guards grabbed his arms as federal agents emerged from the crowd. Mr. Michael Hayes? One agent stepped forward. We have some questions about your recent activities with TechFin. The room erupted in chaos as they led him away, his shouts echoing off the walls. I maintained my composure, waiting for the noise to settle. As I was saying, I continued, today marks a new chapter. Not just for these businesses, but for every family that's ever been told their dreams were senseless. The presentation continued smoothly after that. Charts showed projected growth, innovation plans, integration strategies. But the real story was happening in the front row, where my parents watched with a mixture of awe and regret. After the formal announcement during the reception, Mom pulled me aside. Her eyes were red from crying. "All those times we said you were throwing your life away," she whispered. "You were actually preparing to save everyone else's." "Mom, no, let me finish." She gripped my hands. "We were so focused on protecting you from failure that we nearly prevented you from achieving something extraordinary." Dad joined us, looking uncomfortable in his new suit. "The other business owners told me what Michael tried to do to them. How you stepped in, offered them a way out, a way forward. That's what technology should do," I said. "Not replace tradition, but enhance it. Like I tried to tell you years ago." Aaliyah appeared with champagne. "The press wants to know if the family business savior has any comment about her cousin's arrest." "Tell them karma needs no comment." Aunt Adeline answered for me, raising her glass. Though I must say, watching him being let out in handcuffs was rather satisfying. Barrett tapped my shoulder. "Sorry to interrupt, but the other CEOs want to toast their new board chairwoman." Mom's eyes widened. "Board chairwoman? Of all 23 companies." I nodded, including Dad's, though he's staying on as president of operations. "I'm learning from her now," Dad said quietly. "Should have been doing that all along." The reception buzzed with energy as families who'd almost lost everything celebrated their new beginning. I watched as Dad explained our technology to other business owners, his face animated with possibilities he'd once feared. "You know," Aunt Adeline murmured, "revenge is sweetest when it lifts everyone up instead of tearing anyone down." "This wasn't about revenge," I protested. She laughed. "Of course it was, dear, but it was also about something bigger. You didn't just prove them wrong, you proved them better than they knew they could be." As I looked around the room at all the families whose businesses we'd saved, I realized she was right. The best revenge wasn't destroying Michael or proving my parents wrong. It was showing them exactly how right I could be. The autumn breeze carried the scent of Mom's famous apple pie through the open windows of my childhood home. In the backyard, Dad was teaching Barrett the secret to pruning his prize roses, while Alea set the patio table for Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd recently revived. "Never thought I'd see your father willingly share his gardening secrets." Aunt Adeline smiled, helping me carry dishes outside. Then again, I never thought I'd see him taking coding classes either. "The students in his digital transformation seminar love him," I laughed, especially when he tells them about initially calling computers fancy calculators. My phone buzzed. A news alert about Michael's sentencing. 8 years for fraud and market manipulation. I switched it off, refusing to let him intrude on this moment. "Dinner's ready," Mom called from the kitchen. As everyone gathered around the table, I noticed the subtle changes in my parents. Mom's proud posture as she served the meal she'd cooked in her newly renovated kitchen. Dad's relaxed smile as he discussed upcoming tech implementations with his business partner. "Before we eat," Dad stood, clearing his throat, "I have an announcement." He pulled out a familiar-looking folder, the one Mom had kept of my press clippings. "Yesenia, remember how you always wanted to expand the business education program at your old high school?" I nodded, curious. "Well, your mother and I are starting a scholarship fund, the Senseless Dreamers Grant, for young entrepreneurs who dare to think differently." My fork clattered against the plate. "Dad, using some of the profits from our merged companies," Mom added, her eyes shining, "to help other parents recognize their children's potential before—" She paused, composing herself. "Before they almost lose them like we almost lost you." Barrett raised his glass. "To senseless dreamers everywhere. And to those who learn to believe in them." Aunt Adeline added pointedly, looking at my parents. Actually, Alia interjected, there's something else. She pulled out her laptop, opening it to reveal a familiar-looking code interface. Yesenia's been teaching me programming. I'm launching a companion app to Simple Books, focusing on helping traditional businesses transition to digital. Mom didn't even flinch at the announcement. Instead, she beamed. Tell us more about it, honey. As Alia excitedly explained her project, I watched my father's face. Not a trace of the dismissive skepticism that had once greeted my own dreams. He asked intelligent questions about user interface and market research, proving he'd been paying attention in those coding classes. I have one more surprise, I said when Alea finished. I handed Dad a small box. Inside was a new nameplate for his office. Isaac Davidson, Chief Innovation Officer. But that's your position, he protested. Was my position. The board unanimously agreed. You've shown an incredible talent for bridging the gap between traditional business and technology. We need you in this role. He stared at the nameplate, running his fingers over the engraved letters. I spent so many years resisting change, fighting against the future instead of embracing it. I almost lost everything because of that fear. But you didn't. Mom touched his arm. You learned. We all did. Speaking of learning, Barrett chimed in, wait until you hear Yesenia's next project. It's going to revolutionize how family businesses... Actually, I interrupted, I thought Dad might like to present that one at the next board meeting. He came up with half the concept during our strategy session. Pride blazed across Dad's face. Not the old pride of stubborn tradition, but the new pride of shared achievement. Of dreams built together instead of torn apart. Aunt Adeline raised her glass again. To the family business, both the business part and the family part. As we clinked glasses, I caught Mom slipping another article into her folder. This one about Alea's upcoming app launch. Some habits die hard, but this one had transformed from a secret shrine to missed opportunities into a celebration of possibilities. You know? Dad said quietly as everyone else broke into smaller conversations. I keep thinking about that day you left. How sure I was that you were making a mistake. Now I realize the only mistake was not dreaming big enough to include you in my vision of success. I squeezed his hand. Maybe we needed that distance to find our way back here, to build something better together. The evening sun cast long shadows across the yard, but for once I wasn't counting the minutes until I could escape back to my own world. This was my world now, too. Not because I'd proven them wrong, but because we'd all grown enough to create something new together. Sometimes the best dreams aren't the ones we chase alone, but the ones we learn to share.
Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. That's how I met Marco. My name's Cora, and I was 28, working as a fitness trainer at a local gym, living a life as structured and disciplined as my fitness routines. That's until Marco walked in one day, looking for a quick workout, and ended up changing my whole life's course. Hey, I'm Marco, he said, flashing a smile that could light up the darkest of rooms. Heard this is the best place to get in shape. Mind showing me the ropes? I raised an eyebrow, sizing him up. He didn't look like the usual gym type, more like he spent his days charming his way through life. Sure, Marco. Follow my lead, and you'll be in shape in no time. But I warn you, I don't go easy on anyone. Marco chuckled, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Wouldn't have it any other way. Lead on, Cora. Training Marco was like trying to tame a wild stallion. He had energy for days and a stubborn streak to match. But beneath the jokes and easy banter, there was a genuine respect, a connection that neither of us could deny. The days turned into weeks, and our sessions at the gym became the highlight of my days. It wasn't just about the workouts anymore, it was the laughter, the stories, the shared moments in between the sweat and hard work. One evening, as we were wrapping up, Marco turned to me, a serious look replacing his usual grin. Cora, I've got to tell you something. I'm not just here for the workouts. I'm here for you. You've got this fire, this strength that I've never seen in anyone else. And I'm crazy about you. I was taken aback. This was Marco, the guy who joked about everything, now standing in front of me, bare and honest. Marco, I don't know what to say. You're not what I expected. But I can't deny it, there's something between us. Something real. That was the start of our whirlwind romance. It was intense, passionate, like a storm that sweeps everything in its path. And before I knew it, I was saying I do to the man who had walked into my gym and turned my world upside down. But the fairy tale didn't last long. After the wedding, Marco dropped a bombshell that would set the stage for the battles to come. Cora, we need to move into my mother's house. I've got strong family ties, and it's important for me to be there for them. I felt my stomach drop. Maria, his mother, was a force to be reckoned with, her sharp tongue and critical eye a stark contrast to Marco's warmth. And then there was Sophia, his sister, a mirror image of her mother's arrogance and disdain. Marco, are you sure about this? Your mother and Sophia, our relationship is strained, to put it mildly. Is this really the best idea? I asked, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. Marco took my hands in his gaze earnest. Cora, I know it's not ideal. But family is everything to me. We'll make it work, I promise. You, me, and our little family against the world. Moving into Marco's family home felt like stepping onto a battlefield every day. Maria's house was a fortress, her rules, her way, or the highway. And Sophia, she was like her shadow, echoing her mother's every frown and snide remark. Morning, Cora, Maria would say, her voice dripping with something that was anything but warmth. Don't forget the dishes need doing, and the living room needs a good dusting. We run a tight ship here. I'd nod, biting back the retort that threatened to spill. Of course, Maria. I wouldn't want the house anything less than perfect. Sophia would smirk from her perch at the kitchen table, her eyes scanning me like I was some bug under a microscope. Yeah, Cora. And try to keep up, will ya? We don't need any dead weight around here. The days were long, the work unending. It was like living in a loop, each day a repeat of the last. Cleaning, cooking, trying to find my footing in a house that felt more like a minefield. Marco was there, but not really. His restaurant was his world, and I was just a ghost in his family home. But then, life decided to throw me a curveball. I was pregnant. The news should have been a beacon of joy, but in Maria's house, it was just another ripple in already troubled waters. Pregnant, huh? Maria's voice was flat, her eyes hard. Well, don't expect any special treatment. This house doesn't run itself, you know. I held my ground, my hand instinctively resting on my belly. I don't expect special treatment, Maria. But I do expect some understanding. I'm carrying a child, your grandchild. That shut her up, if only for a moment. But it didn't last. The chores piled up, the glares grew sharper, and the house felt smaller with each passing day. Sophia was no help. She watched me struggle, a satisfied smirk never far from her lips. You're slowing down, Cora, she'd taunt. Can't handle a bit of housework? What kind of mother are you gonna be? I wanted to scream, to lash out. But I held it in. For Marco, for the tiny heartbeat that was growing stronger each day. The tension was a constant companion, an uninvited guest at every meal, every moment. Marco, he tried, in his way. But his family, his restaurant, they pulled him in 1,000 different directions, and I was just one more voice in the cacophony of his life. Marco, talk to them, please. I pleaded one night, the weight of the day heavy on my shoulders. Your mother, Sophia, they treat me like I'm nothing, like I don't belong. Marco sighed, a tired sound that spoke volumes. Cora, they're just set in their ways. It's how they've always been. Just give it time, it'll get better. But it didn't get better. It got harder, the house more suffocating, Maria and Sophia more relentless. And me, I was just trying to keep my head above water, to protect the tiny life that depended on me. As I lay in bed each night, the moon casting shadows across the room, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let their words, their disdain, define me. I was stronger than they knew, and one day, they'd see. One day, this house, this battlefield, it would be mine to conquer. Becoming a mother was supposed to be the most beautiful chapter of my life. But in Maria's house, it felt more like a trial by fire. Luca was my little bundle of joy, my ray of sunshine in the storm. Yet, every cry, every smile, was overshadowed by the relentless pressure and criticism from Maria and Sofia. "Really, Cora, can't you keep that child quiet?" Maria would snap, her words sharp as knives, every time Luca so much as whimpered. I held Luca closer, whispering words of comfort, shielding him from the harshness of his own grandmother's words. "He's just a baby, Maria. Babies cry. That's how they communicate." Sofia would roll her eyes, her voice dripping with disdain. "Oh, please. You're just not doing it right, Cora. Maybe if you paid more attention to him instead of feeling sorry for yourself, he'd be quieter." Their words stung, each one a reminder of how out of place I felt in this house, in this family. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way they looked at me, the way they scrutinized my every move, especially after my body had changed from the pregnancy. The weight I'd gained became their favorite topic, a source of endless ridicule. "Looks like those fitness trainer days are long gone, huh, Cora?" Maria would chuckle, eyeing my figure with a smirk. "Better lay off the sweets if you want to fit into your old clothes again." I clenched my fists, forcing a smile to hide the hurt. "I'm proud of my body, Maria. It brought Luca into this world. The weight? It's temporary. But the love I have for my son, that's forever." But my words, my defiance, it didn't matter to them. I was the outsider, the intruder in their perfect little world. And no matter how hard I tried, it never seemed to be enough. Enough was enough. The constant belittling from Maria and Sofia wasn't just chipping away at my spirit, it was igniting a fire within me. A fire to reclaim my life, my body, and my self-respect. I decided to take my journey into my own hands, right there in the four walls of that suffocating house. I started simple, turning a corner of my room into my personal gym. It wasn't much, just a mat, some weights, and a determination as strong as steel. "This is it, Luca," I whispered to my little boy, cradling him in one arm while setting up my phone to record. "Mommy's turning it all around, starting now." The first few days were tough, the exercises leaving me breathless, my muscles screaming. But each drop of sweat, each aching limb, felt like a triumph. "Think you can just bounce back, Cora?" Maria sneered one day, watching me pant through my routine. "It's not that easy, you know. Takes more than a few stretches to fix what's broken." I wiped my brow, fixing her with a steely gaze. "Watch me, Maria. I'm not just fixing what's broken. I'm building something stronger. And I don't need your approval or your snide comments." That's when I decided to go public with my journey. I started a YouTube channel and an Instagram page, sharing every struggle, every victory. It was raw, it was real, and to my surprise, it resonated with so many out there. "Mom, look at this," I'd say to Luca, showing him the screen filled with comments and likes. "We're not alone. There are so many rooting for us." And then came the advertisers, their offers turning my little corner of the internet into a thriving source of income. I was stunned, overwhelmed, but above all, I was empowered. "Can you believe this, Luca?" I'd whisper, tucking him into bed. "We're doing it. We're really doing it." But with every success, the tension in the house grew thicker. Maria and Sofia couldn't stand it, the way I'd turned their ridicule into my armor, their disdain into my driving force. "What's this now, Cora? Playing the star while the rest of us do the real work?" Sofia spat one day, her eyes venomous. I stood my ground, Luca on my hip, my heart stronger than ever. "It's called turning the tide, Sofia. It's called taking back control. And if that bothers you, well, that's your problem, not mine." The house that once felt like a prison was now just a backdrop. My world was larger, brighter, filled with the love of my son and the support of a community that saw me, the real me. The success of my online channels was a sweet victory, but it brought a new kind of challenge. Marco was stunned by the numbers, the comments, the sheer scale of it. But his pride was bruised. He didn't want the world, especially his family, to see the shift in our roles. Cora, it's incredible. But you know how my mother and Sophia are. Please, let's keep this between us. I don't want them thinking I'm not the provider. He pleaded one evening, his eyes begging for understanding. I sighed, the weight of his request heavy on my shoulders. Marco, I'm proud of what I've achieved. It's not just about the money, it's about respect, about independence. He nodded, his hand reaching for mine. I know, and I respect that. But in this house, it's complicated. Let's just keep it our little secret, for now. I agreed, reluctantly, and began transferring $4,000 a month to Marco's account. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Maria and Sophia continued their tirade, oblivious to the truth. They saw me as a leech, living off their precious son and brother. You're just a freeloader, Cora. Always taking, never contributing. Maria would snarl, her words sharp as ever. I bit back my retort, the secret of my success a silent shield against her barbs. I contribute in my own way, Maria. Not that you'd ever acknowledge it. Sophia was no better. What do you even do all day, Cora? Lounge around while we do all the real work? Their ignorance was a bitter pill, but I swallowed it. My focus was Luca, my channels, my newfound strength. I'd walk with my son in the park, my camera a constant companion, capturing the moments, the workouts, the real me that they refused to see. Cora, you're wasting your time with those videos, Maria would scoff, watching me edit my latest post. But the numbers told a different story. The subscribers, the views, the comments, they were real, tangible. They were mine. Maybe to you, Maria. But to me, and to thousands out there, it's anything but a waste, I'd reply, my confidence unshaken. Marco's restaurant troubles added another layer to our already complicated life. He came to me one day, his pride barely holding back his desperation. Cora, the restaurant, it's struggling. I need help. Would you lend me some money? Just to tide things over? His vulnerability was a rare sight, and it tugged at my heartstrings. Of course, Marco. I'll help. But this isn't just a loan, it's an investment. In us, in our family. His relief was palpable, but it was tinged with the unspoken truth. I was the lifeline, the silent savior of the family facade. And as I transferred $10,000, as I watched the gratitude and the guilt in his eyes, I knew the balance had shifted. Time in that house felt like a ticking bomb, and each day brought us closer to the explosion. Sophia's marriage brought her husband, Rick, into an already cramped space. His presence only added to the chaos and tension that had become a constant in the house. You two just take up space, Maria would sneer, her words cutting through the crowded living room. You're nothing but freeloaders, Cora. You and that kid. I clenched my teeth, hugging Luca closer. We're family, Maria. Or at least, that's what a house like this is supposed to mean. But when Sophia announced her pregnancy, Maria's attitude shifted into something even harsher, more direct. This house is getting crowded, Cora. And frankly, you and your boy are just in the way. The words stung, but before I could muster a response, Marco dropped a bombshell of his own at dinner. I have to go out of town for a few weeks. Restaurant business, he said, avoiding my gaze. A few weeks in this madhouse without even the slightest buffer Marco provided felt like a sentence I couldn't bear. You're leaving? Now? With everything going on? I asked, my voice barely a whisper over the lump in my throat. He didn't meet my eyes. I have to, Cora. It's important. And just like that, he was gone. The door shut behind him, and the weight of his absence settled over the house like a thick fog. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Luca. We went for our walks, did our workouts in the park, anything to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house. But when we returned from kindergarten one day, the sight that greeted us froze me in my tracks. Our belongings, bags, suitcases, Luca's toys, were piled up outside the front door like garbage. "Mommy, what's happening?" Luca's small voice was laced with confusion and fear. I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears as I approached the door. "Maria, Sophia, what is this? Why are our things outside?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. The response came cold and merciless from the other side of the door. "You heard me, Cora. The house is too crowded, and you two are just taking up space. It's time for you to leave. Find somewhere else to call home." Maria's voice was like a knife, and Sophia's echoing laughter only twisted it deeper. I stood there, my whole world collapsing around me. And what should I tell Marco? What will you say to your son when he asks where his wife and child are? Their laughter was the only answer I got. It was clear, in their eyes, we were expendable, an inconvenience easily discarded. With a heavy heart and a mind swirling with shock and betrayal, I gathered our belongings. Holding Luca's hand tightly, I stepped away from the house that was never a home. The pain was sharp, the betrayal bitter, but it was the clarity of the moment that struck me the most. This was the end of one chapter, a chapter of struggle and pain. But it was also the beginning of something new, something ours. I rented an apartment, a small but safe haven for me and Luca. As I unpacked our lives, the reality of what had happened, of what I had escaped, began to sink in. I was alone, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense of freedom. Settling into the new apartment was a bittersweet experience. It was a safe haven for me and Luca, a place where the shadows of Maria's house couldn't reach us. I was meticulously arranging our belongings, trying to make the space feel like home, when my phone buzzed with a message that sent shockwaves through my world. It was from Sophia, her message laced with a sickening glee. "You think you know Marco? Think again, Cora." Attached was a link, a portal to a truth I had never imagined. Trembling, I clicked the link. The screen lit up with images that shattered my reality. There was Marco, not buried in restaurant woes, but in the arms of another woman. Their intimacy was undeniable, the photos a stark contrast to the lies he'd fed me. The most recent ones were dated just yesterday. The business trip, the stress he'd mentioned, it was all a facade, a cruel play where I was the unwitting financier. I felt numb, the pain and betrayal intertwining into a cold resolve. For years, I had been the backbone, the silent benefactor of a man who lived a double life, all while his family treated me like dirt. A week of turbulent emotions was broken by incessant calls from Marco. His voice, once a comfort, was now a trigger for my contempt. "Cora, please, you need to come back. Mom and Sophia crossed a line. And the restaurant, it's in shambles. I need you, Cora. The bills, they're piling up." The pleas that would have once pulled at my heartstrings, now evoked nothing but disdain. "So you only need me to pay your bills and your family's bills?" His voice cracked, desperation seeping through. "We're still a family. You, me, Luca. Isn't that worth fighting for?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "A family? Is that what you call this charade?" "No, Marco. We're far from a family. And as for your restaurant, your debts? They're yours to deal with." Silence filled the line, heavy and uncomfortable. I could almost feel the weight of his predicament pressing down on him. "But Cora, the money, Your problem, Marco. Your restaurant, your money. I'm done being your lifeline." I cut in, my voice unwavering, strong. "However, we will discuss all this tomorrow. I will come to your mother's house." I made my decision. I'd return to that house, not as the broken woman they expected, but as the force they never saw coming. I'd face Marco, Maria, and Sophia, armed with the truth and a plan that would turn their world upside down. Stepping into the house was like entering a lion's den. Marco's face lit up with a mix of hope and surprise, but Maria and Sophia's expressions were as cold as ice. They clearly weren't thrilled about my return. "Look who's back," Maria said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Missed us, have you?" I met her gaze, without flinching. "Not at all, Maria. I'm here for something important." I handed Marco the envelope, his face turning pale as he recognized it for what it was. "Divorce papers, Marco," I stated, the words tasting of freedom. "Our marriage ends here." Maria and Sophia's initial shock quickly morphed into smiles. "Finally getting rid of the dead weight, Marco?" Sophia jeered, her laughter grating on my nerves. But their joy was premature. "Don't get too excited," I interjected sharply. "You might want to sit down for this. It's been me, not Marco, keeping this household afloat." The room fell into stunned silence. Marco's eyes darted between me and his family, the truth finally out in the open. "It's true," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "The restaurant's been failing. Cora's been covering everything. She transferred $4,000 to me every month." Maria and Sophia turned on him, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. "You lied to us? You let her pay our bills?" Maria's voice was shrill. "What should we do now, without her money?" "Then," Marco continued, his desperation clear, "I'm going to file for alimony. I earn less, so it's only fair." His mother and sister were delighted with this decision and even clapped their hands. Their claps echoed hollowly in the room, but I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "You think that's going to work, Marco? You won't get a cent from me. Especially not after I found out about your affair." The color drained from his face. "How did you?" he stammered, his false bravado crumbling. I pointedly looked at Sophia. "Your sister was kind enough to send me all the proof I needed." The argument that erupted was fierce, the house filled with accusations and betrayals laid bare. Marco and Sophia were shouting at each other, waving their arms. Amid the chaos, I remained calm, my next move clear. "I'm taking back what's mine," I declared, my voice cutting through the noise. "Every appliance, every piece of furniture I paid for. You're left with what you've earned, which is nothing." And that's exactly what I did. I stripped the house of every trace of my financial support, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. Maria's and Sophia's pleas for mercy, for forgiveness, were ignored. I blocked their numbers, severing the last ties to a life of deceit and disrespect. The fallout was swift. Marco's restaurant crumbled under the weight of debt, the house was lost, and Sophia's husband walked away from the wreckage of their family. They were left with nothing but each other and their mistakes in a cramped rented apartment. As for me, Luca and I flourished in our new life. Our days were filled with love, laughter, and the peace we'd fought so hard to find. The past was behind us, a distant memory overshadowed by the bright future we were building together. We were more than survivors, we were conquerors, and our story was just beginning. "Jane, you seriously need a break from all these dusty books. It's Clara's birthday bash tonight. You gotta join us," Liz practically commanded, her voice laced with that mix of concern and exasperation she reserved just for me. I'm Jane, a 34-year-old English literature professor, more comfortable dissecting Shakespeare's sonnets than navigating social gatherings. "Fine, Liz. But if it's a snooze fest, I'm holding you responsible," I replied, marking my place in Hamlet with a sigh. That evening, Clara's party was in full swing, a whirl of laughter and clinking glasses. That's where I met Alex. He was the finance guy, his world of stocks and assets as distant from my literary haven as could be. Yet, something clicked, a spark neither of us could deny. "Shakespeare, huh? That's pretty highbrow." "I'm more about the Wall Street Journal than the Globe Theatre," Alex joked, his smile infectious. I chuckled, the warmth in his eyes softening my usual reserve. Well, perhaps I can show you that literature has its own charms. Might even teach you a thing or two about the human condition, I quipped, finding myself surprisingly at ease. The conversation didn't skip a beat, flowing as smoothly as the evening breeze. Soon, our casual meets turned into late-night talks, and before we knew it, we were inseparable. The idea of us seemed as natural as the turning of pages in one of my books. Meeting Alex's mother, Elaine, was like stepping into a scene from a novel. She exuded warmth and elegance, her demeanor as inviting as the home she welcomed me into. "Jane, dear, it's so wonderful to finally meet you. Alex hasn't stopped talking about you." "I feel like I know you already," Elaine greeted me, her voice a soothing melody. "It's an absolute pleasure to meet you too, Elaine. Alex speaks so highly of you," I responded, genuinely touched by her kindness. The day Alex came to visit my family home was a chapter on its own. The awe in his eyes was unmistakable as he took in the sprawling estate, the tangible proof of my father's success. "Your family's place is something else, Jane. Your dad must have a Midas touch with investments," Alex remarked, his voice a mix of admiration and something else I couldn't quite place. "He's done well for himself, indeed. The stock exchange has been kind to him," I replied, my pride in my family's achievements shining through. My parents embraced Alex with open arms, his charm and apparent adoration for me sealing his place in their hearts. The stage was set, our roles as the perfect couple cemented. The wedding was a dream, a celebration of love and promises of a shared future. The days following our wedding were supposed to be the happiest of my life. Instead, they turned into a relentless storm of heartache and dread. Dad, the strongest man I knew, was suddenly confined to a hospital bed, his strength waning under the cruel grip of cancer. The hospital's sterile, white walls became our grim reality, the beeping of machines a constant, unwelcome soundtrack. One bleak evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the hospital room, Dad called me over with a feeble gesture. His eyes, once so full of life, now mirrored the fatigue and pain he was enduring. "Jane, my darling," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to be strong. I've made arrangements for you, for after I'm gone. There's an inheritance, $2 million. It's yours, my dear. I want you to have a secure future." I gripped his hand, the cold reality of his words piercing my heart. "Dad, please, don't talk like that. You're going to get through this." But before I could absorb the gravity of his revelation, Alex, who had been lingering by the door, stepped forward, his reaction sending a chill down my spine. "2 million, sir? That's quite a fortune. I mean, Jane, we need to think about how to manage this blessing," he said, his tone unsettlingly eager, his gaze not meeting mine. The days turned into an agonizing cycle of hospital visits and silent, tension-filled nights at home. Alex's demeanor had shifted, the man I had fallen in love with seemed consumed by thoughts of the inheritance, his warmth replaced by a cold, calculating distance. One night, as we sat in the dim glow of our living room, the silence between us thick and suffocating, Alex broke the stillness, his words like a cold gust in an already frigid room. "Jane, we need to talk about the future, about the inheritance. Think about it, we could really turn our lives around. A luxury home, maybe travel the world. It's time to start planning, don't you think?" he urged, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling within me. "Planning? My dad is lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life, and you're here making plans for a future splurge? Is that all you care about, Alex? The money?" He recoiled, as if my words were physical blows. No, Jane, you've got it all wrong. I'm just trying to look out for us, for our future." I didn't mean to. But his words rang hollow, the apology a feeble attempt to mask the naked greed that had seeped into his voice. In that moment, a painful truth began to dawn on me. The man I had vowed to spend my life with was a stranger, His thoughts not on the profound loss we were about to face, but on the financial gain it would bring. Life after Dad's diagnosis was like walking through a never-ending fog. My home, once a place of laughter and warmth, felt cold, the air thick with unsaid words and hidden agendas. Elaine, Alex's mom, came into our lives like she was the cavalry, ready to save the day. But her eyes, sharp and calculating, told a different story. "Jane, honey, you're worn to a thread," Elaine said one evening, her voice smooth but with an edge that made me uneasy. "Let me help around here. You shouldn't carry all this alone." I was too tired, too beaten down by the relentless waves of worry, to argue. "Thanks, Elaine. I appreciate it, I really do," I replied, trying to muster a smile. But the real storm was still brewing, quietly, sneakily. That night, Elaine came to my room with a small bottle in her hand. "Jane, you look like you could use some real rest. These will help you sleep. Trust me," she said, pushing the bottle of pills towards me. Something in her insistence set off alarm bells in my mind, but the promise of a few hours free from my racing thoughts was too tempting. "All right, I'll give them a try." "Thanks, Elaine," I said, though a part of me was screaming to throw the pills away. No sooner had she left than whispers from the living room reached my ears, a low murmur of conspiracy that pulled me out of my bed and towards the door. I cracked it open, the sliver of light from the living room casting long shadows on the floor. Alex's voice, usually so warm and loving, was cold, almost cruel. "She's out like a light, Mom. Those pills knock her right out. We can talk business now," he said, a hint of glee in his tone that turned my blood to ice. Elaine's reply was a quiet, venomous chuckle. "Perfect. Now, about that inheritance. Half of it is legally yours, you know. We're talking about a serious cash injection." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were the people who were supposed to be my family, my support. Instead, they were plotting like villains in one of the tragedies I taught in class. Alex's next words were a punch to the gut. "Half? That's kids' play, Mom. I want the whole pie. We need to figure out how to get Jane to sign it all over. Once I have the cash, I can cut her loose." I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, feeling like the floor had just dropped away from under me. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a full-blown conspiracy, a plan to rob me of my inheritance, my dignity, my life as I knew it. The morning sun did little to brighten the heavy atmosphere in the house after I uncovered Alex and Elaine's despicable scheme. Sitting at the kitchen table, the untouched coffee in front of me turned cold, a stark reminder of the chilling conversation I had overheard. The betrayal felt like a gaping wound, and I was at a loss, unsure how to navigate this treacherous storm. Mom entered the kitchen, her steps firm, her presence always a beacon of strength in our home. She noticed my distress immediately, her perceptive eyes missing nothing. "Jane, what's wrong? You're as pale as a ghost. Talk to me," she urged, her voice a blend of concern and command. I hesitated, the weight of betrayal heavy on my tongue. But seeing the unwavering support in her eyes, I found the courage to confess. "Mom, it's Alex and Elaine. I overheard them last night. They're plotting, scheming to take Dad's inheritance, and then, they plan to leave me with nothing." The kitchen fell silent, the air thick with tension. Mom's face remained stoic, but her eyes were sharp, a storm brewing in their depths. "Is that so?" she said calmly, her voice betraying no hint of the rage I knew she must be feeling. "Well, they've picked the wrong family to mess with. We're not pawns in their little game, Jane. We're the ones who'll be calling checkmate." Her words were like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. "But how, Mom? They've got everything planned out. It's like they've been setting this trap for a long time," I replied, the enormity of the situation threatening to overwhelm me. Mom's smile was thin but determined. "Planning is one thing, executing is another. They think they're clever, but they're not the only ones who can play this game. We need to be strategic, think 2 steps ahead." The kitchen became our war room, the table a battleground where strategies were formed and tactics were laid out. First, we need to secure your assets, make sure they can't get their hands on what's rightfully yours, Mom said, her mind racing through the legal labyrinths. But Mom, the inheritance is huge, and it's all in my name. How can we protect it from them? I asked, the problem seeming insurmountable. She gave me a look that was both fierce and reassuring. We'll consult with the best lawyers, set up trusts, do whatever it takes. Your father didn't work his whole life for his legacy to fall into the hands of vultures. As the plan took shape, I felt a spark of hope ignite within me. Mom, you're incredible. I don't know what I'd do without you. Her hand reached across the table, gripping mine with a strength that bolstered my resolve. You're your father's daughter, Jane, strong and smart. You'll never have to face anything alone. Now, let's put our plan into action and show those snakes they've bitten off more than they can chew. The day of the will reading was like the calm before the storm. The notary's office was stark and formal, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning in my heart. Alex and Elaine were there, their faces poorly masked with faux solemnity, but their eyes, hungry and calculating, betrayed their true intentions. The notary, a stern-faced man with a no-nonsense air, cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence. We are gathered here to read the last will and testament of Mr. James Harrington. As per his wishes, the contents of the will are to be disclosed in the presence of his immediate family. Alex leaned in, a wolfish grin barely concealed. This is it, Jane. Our new beginning, he whispered, his breath cold against my ear. I stiffened, repulsed by his proximity and the implication of his words. Before I could respond, the notary began to speak, his voice formal and detached. Mr. Harrington bequeathed the sum of $2 million to his daughter, Jane Harper. A gasp escaped Elaine, her facade crumbling for a moment to reveal the greed that lay beneath. Alex's hand twitched, a visceral reaction to the mention of the money. He was about to congratulate me, no doubt seeing dollar signs, when the notary continued. However, it is also stated here that Mr. Harrington incurred debts amounting to $2.5 million. The room went cold. Alex's face drained of color, his earlier excitement replaced by shock and disbelief. Elaine's mouth opened and closed, a fish out of water, her plans unraveling before her eyes. This can't be right, Alex stammered, his composure shattered. There must be some mistake. The notary, unfazed, pushed forward a stack of documents. I assure you, everything is documented and legal. Mr. Harrington's assets and liabilities are now passed on to his next of kin. Elaine's eyes darted between the papers and my stoic face. But that means, half of the debt is Alex's responsibility too? Yes, ma'am. According to the law, marital assets and liabilities are shared, the notary confirmed, his voice devoid of sympathy. The revelation hit Alex and Elaine like a physical blow. Their dream of wealth had turned into a nightmare of debt. Elaine's earlier warmth vanished, her true nature, venomous and self-serving, coming to the forefront. We're not paying for this. It's her father's mess, Elaine hissed, her earlier facade of the doting mother-in-law gone. Alex, desperation creeping into his voice, turned to me. Jane, we need to sort this out. You can't let this happen. I looked at him, the man I once loved, now a stranger driven by greed and deceit. Sort this out? Alex, you made your intentions clear. You're not in this for me or for us. You're in this for the money. The room was thick with tension, the notary a silent observer to the drama unfolding before him. In that moment, the storm broke, the veil lifted, revealing the true colors of the people I had once called family. But as I stood there, facing the betrayal and the mountain of debt before me, I knew I wasn't alone. Mom's hand found mine, her grip firm and reassuring. We'll handle this, Jane. Together, she whispered, her voice a bastion of strength. Alex and Elaine, initially struck dumb by the revelation, quickly erupted into a whirlwind of fury and disbelief. This is insane. Alex bellowed, his face contorting with anger. Are you seriously telling me this pile of papers is for real? Show them again, this can't be happening. The notary, a pillar of calm amidst the storm, methodically laid out the documents once more. Each line, each number, was a testament to a reality they couldn't escape. Elaine, her composure shattered, turned her venom towards me. You knew, didn't you? You and your mother planned this. You're trying to drown us in your family's mess. That's when Mom stood up. Her presence filled the room, a quiet force amidst the chaos. Enough, she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. My husband had his faults, his vices. The gambling, the debts, they were his burden. And now, according to the law, they are shared by Jane and Alex. Elaine's face was a mask of rage, her earlier facade of kindness nowhere to be seen. We're not paying for someone else's mistakes. We won't let this happen. Cornered and desperate, Alex played his final, desperate card. If that's how it's going to be, then fine. I want a divorce. And in that agreement, we'll make it crystal clear, neither of us gets anything from the other. No claims, no money, no property. Nothing. His words, meant to intimidate, only fueled my newfound resolve. A divorce? That's the best idea you've had in a long time, Alex. Let's make it official. You walk away empty-handed. No ties, no debts, no nothing. The agreement was drafted with clinical precision, a clear, unambiguous document that severed the ties that once bound us. We signed it, each stroke of the pen marking the end of a chapter, the end of a farce disguised as a marriage. After signing the divorce papers, the heavy door of the notary's office closed behind us with a thud that felt final. The crisp air outside did little to clear the heaviness that hung over me. Alex and Elaine, their masks of pretense thoroughly discarded now, couldn't contain their contempt. Well, Jane, looks like you're stuck with the short end of the stick. $500,000 in debt. That's quite a hole you're in, Alex sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Elaine's laugh was cold, void of any warmth she once feigned. You really thought you could outsmart us? Enjoy paying off your father's mess. Just then, Mom stepped forward, her demeanor calm but with an undercurrent of steel. You two might want to hold off on your celebrations. You see, there's more to this story. Alex scoffed, his arrogance unshaken. What could you possibly say to change anything now, Mrs. Harrington? Mom's smile was enigmatic, a prelude to the revelation that was about to turn the tables. Well, for starters, Jane's not alone in this. I'm here. And unlike what you've been led to believe, the real financial genius in this family has always been me. Elaine's smirk faltered, confusion clouding her features. Alex's expression mirrored his mother's, disbelief and curiosity warring on his face. I've been the one managing the successful investments, the stock market ventures, not my late husband. My net worth? It's currently around $70 million. And yes, Jane is my sole heir. The impact of Mom's words hit Alex and Elaine like a physical blow, their smugness evaporating, replaced by shock and a dawning realization of the grave miscalculation they had made. Alex, the color draining from his face, stammered, 70 million? But that means... Mom's gaze was unwavering, her voice firm. It means, Alex, that you and your mother have been chasing shadows while ignoring the real treasure. Jane's inheritance from me will secure her future. As for the debts left by her father, consider them settled. I won't have my daughter burdened by them. Elaine's mouth opened and closed, words failing her for the first time. Alex, his knees seemingly unable to support him, sank to the ground, his earlier bravado shattered. Please, Jane, I didn't know. I was wrong. Forgive me, he pleaded, his voice barely a whisper, the mask of the cunning strategist gone, leaving only a desperate man in its wake. But it was too late for apologies, too late for regrets. I looked down at the man I once loved, now a stranger groveling at my feet. Forgiveness is earned, Alex, not begged for. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Turning my back on Alex and Elaine, Mom and I walked away, their pleas and protests fading into the background. The last laugh was indeed ours, but it wasn't one of triumph or joy. It was a laugh that acknowledged the end of a painful chapter and the beginning of a new, hopeful journey. The debt, the deceit, the heartbreak, they were all behind us now. Ahead lay a path of healing and rebuilding, with the strength and wisdom of a bond that no storm could break. The last laugh was a promise of brighter days, of a future where the shadows of the past no longer loomed over us. It was the laughter of freedom, of liberation from the chains of greed and betrayal. And as we stepped into the light of a new dawn, it was the laughter that heralded the beginning of a new chapter, written on our own terms, in our own time. The dust had settled, and the dawn of a new day brought clarity and a profound sense of peace. My life, once entangled with Alex and Elaine's deceit, was now my own. Yet, the echoes of their betrayal hadn't faded completely. Alex, in a last-ditch effort to salvage what he had lost, showed up on my doorstep, his eyes hollow, his stance one of desperation. "Jane, please, you have to listen to me. I was wrong, terribly wrong. Can't we just start over, forget all that happened?" he pleaded, his voice a mix of regret and fear. I looked at him, the man I once thought I knew, and felt nothing but detachment. "Start over? After everything you did? Alex, you don't seem to understand. It's over. There's nothing left to say." Before he could respond, a sharp knock interrupted our standoff. Two men, faces stern and purposeful, stood at my doorstep. "Are you Jane Harper? We're here about the debts your husband accrued. He's been borrowing money, making some risky deals, and it's time to settle up." The news didn't shock me as much as it might have before. Alex's capacity for deception seemed boundless. But I was prepared, the pain and betrayal I had endured had forged a resilience I never knew I had. I invited them in, offering a seat but not comfort. "I understand this is a difficult situation, but I'm afraid you're knocking on the wrong door." Alex's face went pale, his eyes darting between me and the creditors, the reality of his situation sinking in. I calmly presented the divorce papers, the ink dry but the words echoing the finality of our severed ties. "As you can see, we're no longer connected legally. Any debts he incurred are his and his alone. We made it explicitly clear in our divorce agreement, no claims on each other's assets or debts." The creditors scanned the documents, their expressions turning from frustration to understanding. "Seems like you've got everything in order, ma'am. We're sorry to bother you. We'll take this up with Mr. Alex Harper directly." As they stood up to leave, Alex reached out, desperation clear in his voice. "Jane, please, you can't let them do this. I'm ruined without your help." I looked at him, a man drowning in the consequences of his own greed and deceit. "Alex, you made your choices. Now you have to live with them. It's time you faced your own storms." With the closing of the door, the chapter of Alex and Elaine finally ended, their presence in my life nothing more than a harsh lesson learned. The dawn of this new day wasn't just the rising of the sun. It was the rising of a stronger, wiser me, a woman who had weathered the storm and emerged not just intact, but empowered. In the heart of the city stood a quaint toy store, a sanctuary where joy was measured in smiles and laughter. That's where my story begins, where fate decided to play its hand. I'm Lily, a 29-year-old who found solace among the aisles of toys, each one holding a story waiting to be told. It was a regular day, the store buzzing with the usual chatter, when he walked in, Jake, the man who unknowingly was about to turn my world upside down. He wandered through the aisles with a look of determination, his eyes scanning the shelves for the perfect gifts. "Excuse me," he said, approaching me with a gentle smile, "I'm on a mission to find the coolest toys for the children of my friends. Any recommendations?" I smiled, pointing towards the latest action figures. "You can't go wrong with these. Kids love them, and they're our top sellers this month." Jake picked up one of the figures, examining it with an intrigued expression. Looks like you really know your stuff. Do you enjoy working here? I laughed, a warm feeling blooming inside. I do. It's more than just a job. It's like being a part of countless happy childhood memories. But tell me more about you. Is being the cool uncle a full-time job? His laughter echoed through the store, a sound that felt oddly comforting. It feels like it sometimes. But seriously, my family is pretty big, parents, 2 younger sisters. One is about to get married and move to another city. It's chaotic, loud, but I wouldn't have it any other way. We continued to chat, our conversation flowing effortlessly. I shared my story, how life had been a solitary journey since my grandmother passed, leaving me her small, cherished house. Jake listened with genuine interest, his eyes never leaving mine. It sounds like you've had your share of challenges, he said softly. Your grandmother must have been a remarkable woman to raise someone as strong and kind as you. The store started to quiet down, signaling the end of the day. Our conversation, however, was far from over. It's not often you meet someone who understands the value of family, I remarked. Your family sounds wonderful. A bit like the big, happy family I've always imagined. Jake's gaze held a warmth that made my heart skip a beat. They are wonderful, and a bit overwhelming at times. But you know, maybe one day you could meet them. I have a feeling they'd love you. As we parted ways that evening, the air was thick with unspoken promises and possibilities. Little did I know, this chance encounter, this hopeful meeting, was the beginning of a journey full of unexpected twists and turns. The day I was to meet Jake's family, my heart fluttered like a butterfly in a garden of hope. Dressed in my best, I rehearsed conversations and imagined laughter-filled rooms. Jake held my hand as we walked up to his family's apartment, his grip reassuring yet tense. Ready to dive into the circus? Jake joked, trying to lighten the mood. I squeezed his hand, a nervous smile on my face. As ready as I'll ever be. Just promise me they won't throw any pies. The door swung open to reveal a bustling living room. Jake's mom, a stout woman with sharp eyes, scrutinized me from head to toe. His dad, a towering figure with a booming voice, offered a brief nod. And then there were Sarah and Megan, Jake's younger sisters, their eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. Family, meet Lily. Lily, this is the crew I warned you about, Jake introduced, a hint of pride in his voice. I extended my hand, my voice barely above a whisper. It's so nice to meet you all. I've heard so much about you. Jake's mom was the first to break the silence. So, you're the girl who's been keeping our Jake so occupied. Tell us about yourself. Jake mentioned you work at a toy store? I nodded, feeling their eyes on me. Yes, I love it there. It's like being surrounded by joy every day. And, well, I was raised by my grandmother. She left me her house, and that's where Jake and I. Sarah cut me off with a laugh that felt more like a jab. Raised by your grandmother, huh? That explains the antique vibe you've got going on. What is this, a retro fashion statement? The room erupted with laughter. Jake's dad chuckled. Good one, Sarah. Lily, you'll get used to our family humor. I forced a smile, my heart sinking. This wasn't the warmth I had anticipated. It felt more like walking into a frost. Jake tried to smooth things over. Come on, guys. Let's not start the roast just yet. Lily's got a great sense of style. Right, Lily? But the damage was done. The evening dragged on, each minute heavier than the last. Sarah and Megan's remarks, veiled as jokes, felt like thorns. Jake's parents, though not as overt, had a dismissiveness that stung. And Jake, bless him, seemed caught between a rock and a hard place, his laughter forced, his glances apologetic. As we left that night, the door closing behind us felt like the end of a performance I never wanted to be a part of. Jake's hand in mine felt distant, and the family I had hoped to embrace seemed like a mirage that had vanished, leaving behind a bitter aftertaste of reality. Sorry about that, Jake murmured as we walked down the corridor. They can be a bit overwhelming. But it'll get better, I promise. I nodded, the words tasting like ash. It's fine, Jake. Maybe it's just first meeting jitters. But deep down, I knew. This was more than jitters. This was a glimpse into a world I wasn't sure I belonged in. A world where warmth was replaced by cold judgment, and acceptance was a currency I didn't possess. And as we walked back to my quiet, humble house, I couldn't help but wonder if the fairy tale I had dreamed of was just that, a dream, now slowly dissolving into the disappointing introduction of reality. The evening I walked into my home, expecting the usual quiet comfort, only to find it disrupted, remains etched in my memory. The lights were on, a sure sign someone else was there. A sense of intrusion crept over me. I dialed Jake's number, my voice trembling with unease. Jake, I think someone's in our house. The lights are on, and you're not home. His laughter on the other end jolted me. Oh, that's just Sarah. I gave her our spare key. She wanted a place to chill. I stood frozen, disbelief and anger intertwining. You gave your sister a key to our house, without asking me? Jake's tone was dismissive. Come on, Lily. She's my sister. Plus, it's not like she's a stranger. As I entered the living room, there she was, Sarah, lounging on our couch, my personal laptop open in front of her. The sight felt like a violation of my private space. Sarah, what are you doing? That's my laptop, I said, my voice firm yet controlled. She didn't even bother looking up. Relax, Lily. We're family now. I figured what's yours is mine, right? That evening, when Jake returned, I confronted him. Jake, your sister can't just barge into our house and use my things without permission. It's not right. His response was infuriating. Lily, you're overreacting. She's just using the laptop. Don't make a big deal out of it. But it is a big deal to me, Jake. It's about respect and privacy, I argued, my frustration growing. Jake just shook his head. I don't see the problem here. She's family. You need to be more accommodating. From then on, Sarah's visits became a regular occurrence. She'd walk in whenever she pleased, treating our home like it was her own. It wasn't just the intrusion that bothered me, it was her complete disregard for our privacy. She'd leave dishes in the sink, move my things around, and never once asked if it was okay. Every time I brought it up with Jake, he brushed it off. She's just comfortable here. Isn't that a good thing? Why are you so hung up on these little things? But they weren't little things to me. They were the threads of respect and boundaries being pulled apart. My home, once my sanctuary, was now a free-for-all, and I felt like a guest in my own space. One day, I came home to find Sarah sprawled on the couch, a pile of her laundry on the living room floor. Sarah, this isn't a laundromat. You can't just do your laundry here, I said, my patience wearing thin. She rolled her eyes. Oh, please, Lily. It's not like I'm asking you to do it for me. Plus, your washer is way better than ours. I couldn't believe the audacity. This was more than just familial comfort, it was entitlement. And Jake's inability to see that, to stand up for our space, was driving a wedge between us. Weekends used to be my retreat, a time to unwind and recharge. But that changed when Jake's family decided our home was their new weekend getaway. It started one Saturday morning. I was greeted not by the quiet I cherished, but by the loud chatter and laughter of Jake's family sprawled across my living room. Morning, Lily. Hope you don't mind, we thought we'd spend the day here. Our place is a bit cramped at the moment, Jake's mom announced cheerily as if they'd done nothing out of the ordinary. I stood there, dumbfounded, my private sanctuary turned into a public domain without my consent. Sure, I wasn't expecting visitors, but make yourselves at home, I managed to say, the words tasting bitter. Jake, who had seemingly forgotten the concept of personal space, chimed in. Isn't it great, Lily? The more, the merrier, right? The day dragged on, their presence an overbearing weight. The living room, once my haven of peace, was now a mess of loud conversations, clutter, and the overwhelming scent of food. They acted as if it was their right, their house. As the day turned into evening, Jake's mom called out from the chaos, "Lily, dear, could you whip up something for dinner? You're such a fantastic cook, and we're all famished." The audacity of the request left me reeling. "Actually, I was planning to order in tonight," I replied, trying to mask my frustration. Jake's dad laughed, a booming sound that filled the room. "Why order when we have a chef in the house? Come on, Lily, show us what you've got." I felt trapped, my own desires and comfort overshadowed by their imposing presence. Cooking in my kitchen, I felt like a stranger, an outsider catering to the whims of uninvited guests. Later that evening, I tried to talk to Jake about it. "Jake, this isn't working for me. Your family can't just take over our home every weekend." Jake, ever the family man, just shrugged. "They're just being family, Lily. This is what families do. You're overthinking it." "But it's our home, Jake. Our space. There should be limits, boundaries," I argued, my voice a mix of plea and demand. He didn't get it, or he chose not to. "Lily, they're not doing any harm. We have the space, why not share it?" I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, the sounds of their laughter and chatter a stark reminder of how my sanctuary had been breached. My home, my rules, my peace, all invaded without a second thought. And the man I shared my life with couldn't, or wouldn't, see the lines being crossed. The once peaceful sanctuary of my home had become a battlefield, the air thick with tension and unspoken words. After countless disputes over the invasion of my privacy, I had retreated to my bedroom, the only space I foolishly thought was still mine. But even that last refuge was about to be snatched away. It was early Saturday morning, the kind of morning where the world should have been still and quiet. But tranquility was a stranger in my own home. I was jolted awake by the sound of my bedroom door being flung open. Disoriented, I blinked against the harsh light as the figures of Jake's parents loomed in the doorway. What are you doing?" My voice was barely a whisper, shock rendering me almost speechless. They didn't even flinch at my obvious discomfort. Instead, Jake's mom, with a sweep of her hand that felt like she was claiming territory, announced, "We've decided this will be our room now. It's the nicest in the house, after all." Jake's dad nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the room, not as a guest, but as someone assessing their property. "Yep, this will do. And don't worry, we left our apartment to Sarah. She needs it more than we do." Their words hit me like a physical blow. This was no ordinary intrusion, this was a full-blown takeover. My room, my private space, was being stripped away right in front of me. Shaken, I scrambled out of bed and found Jake in the kitchen, oblivious or indifferent to the chaos. "Jake, we need to talk. Now. Your parents can't just take over my room like this." Jake sipped his coffee, unfazed. "Lily, why are you making such a big deal out of this? They're just trying to be comfortable. Besides, you can stay in the attic, right?" His words stung more than I thought possible. The attic? "Jake, are you listening to yourself? This is my house, and your family is treating it like a hotel." He shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes of where his loyalties lay. "Well, it's their house too now. You can fix up the attic. It could be a nice project for you." I stood there, disbelief and rage coursing through me. My home, my sanctuary, was being carved up and handed out like slices of pie, and the man I had pledged my life to was holding the knife. As Jake walked away, leaving me to grapple with the reality of the situation, I realized I was alone in this fight. The home I had built, the life I had envisioned, was being dismantled, piece by piece. And the one person who should have been my partner, my ally, was the architect of my despair. But as I stood in the shell of what used to be my refuge, a fierce determination took root. This was my home, my life, and I wasn't about to let it be taken from me. The battle lines were drawn, and I, Lily, was ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The night before Jake and his family left for the wedding, the house was thick with tension and unspoken words. They laid down their plans like a king dictating to his subjects. "We're off tomorrow, Lily, for Megan's wedding. You'll have the house to yourself for a week. Should be plenty of time to get your new attic room ready," Jake's mom declared with a smirk. Jake chimed in, a cold look in his eyes. "Yeah, Lily. It's only fair. Mom and Dad need the space." "It's a small sacrifice, really." Their laughter echoed through the house, a cruel soundtrack to the mockery of my life. The door closed behind them the next morning, the silence they left behind heavy with the weight of their words. But as the sound of their car faded away, a new resolve rose within me. I had always thought a big family was a blessing, but their presence in my life had turned into a curse, one I was determined to break. The first step was clear and unwavering. I marched to the local hardware store, the determination in my steps ringing louder than the jingle of the door as I entered. "I need new locks for my house," I declared to the clerk, my voice a mixture of resolve and newfound strength. As I returned home, the new locks in hand, each click and turn of the screws as I installed them felt like a proclamation of my independence, a reclamation of my space. This house, filled with memories of my grandmother and the dreams I had for my own life, was mine and mine alone. With the new locks firmly in place, I turned my attention to the next task. Jake's belongings, once scattered throughout the house, were methodically packed away. Each item I placed in the boxes was like shedding a layer of the life I no longer recognized. As the week passed, my anticipation grew. The day of their return loomed over me, but the fear that once might have gripped me had transformed into something fiercer, a readiness to confront whatever came next. And then the day arrived. The sound of their car pulling up, the confused voices as they found their keys no longer worked, the rising volume as reality set in, it was a symphony of my making. "What's this, Lily? Playing games now? Open this door." Jake's voice was a mix of command and desperation, his words hammering against the firm resolve that shielded me. I opened the window slightly, my voice steady and unwavering. "It's no game, Jake. It's reality. The reality where I reclaim my home and my life. Your things are outside. You can take them and go." His mom's voice cut through next, sharp and accusatory. "You think you can just throw us out like trash? After we welcomed you into our family?" The irony of her words almost made me laugh. "Welcomed? No, you invaded, you disrespected, and you overstepped every boundary. This is my home, and it's time you all accepted that." The voices rose, a cacophony of disbelief and anger. Jake's dad, his voice booming, joined in. "You can't do this to us, Lily. We're family. Family sticks together." I shook my head, a slight smile playing on my lips. Family respects each other. Family supports and loves, not belittles and takes over. What you call sticking together felt more like being trapped. That's not family, that's a hostage situation. Their pleas turned into threats, their threats into insults. But with each word they hurled at me, my resolve only grew stronger. I had built a fortress, not just of locks and doors, but of self-respect and dignity. As the reality of the situation settled in, Jake's voice, once full of authority, now trembled with a hint of realization. "Lily, please. Let's talk about this. We can sort it out." But the time for talking had passed long ago. "There's nothing left to talk about, Jake. I gave you and your family every chance to be part of my life, my home. But you chose to treat it like a free-for-all. You chose to stand by and watch as they disrespected me, in my own home. That was your choice, Now, this is mine. The neighbors, drawn by the commotion, watched from a distance. Whispers and glances were exchanged, the drama unfolding before them, a stark reminder of how quickly the veneer of civility can crack. And when the noise became too much, when the insults and the banging on the door threatened to breach my newfound peace, I called the authorities. The arrival of the police was the final punctuation in a long and exhausting sentence. I explained the situation, my voice a testament to the journey I had been on. The officers, their faces a blend of sympathy and professionalism, turned to Jake and his family. "You need to leave now. If you refuse, we'll have to take further action." As they finally collected Jake's belongings and retreated, a profound sense of calm enveloped me. The house, once a battlefield, was now quiet. The door, once a revolving entry for disrespect, was now a barrier against it. A week had passed since I took a stand, the quiet in my home a stark contrast to the turmoil that had once reigned. I was sipping my coffee, the warmth a gentle reminder of the peace I had reclaimed, when a knock shattered the tranquility. It was Sarah, her face twisted in anger, standing on my doorstep like an unwelcome storm. "Lily, you think you're so high and mighty, kicking everyone out? You're nothing but a selfish, greedy woman." Sarah spat the words out, her voice dripping with resentment. I leaned against the doorframe, my stance firm. "Sarah, this is my home, and I will not be insulted in it. Your family overstayed their welcome, and I did what was necessary." She scoffed, her laugh harsh and jarring. "Necessary? You've turned everything upside down. I had the apartment to myself, and now? Now it's a circus again. Mom, Dad, Jake, all crammed in because of you." Her words were meant to wound, but I only felt a profound sense of relief. "That's not my problem, Sarah. You all made your choices, and now you're living with them." Sarah's face reddened, her anger a tangible force. "You can't just toss us aside like this. We're family." I shook my head, a sad smile on my lips. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. I gave you all chances, but you chose to ignore them. I deserve respect and peace in my own home." Her words became a blur, insults and accusations thrown aimlessly. But they no longer touched me. I had built a wall, not just of locks and doors, but of self-respect and resolve. As she continued her tirade, I realized the truth in her words. Her anger wasn't just about being thrown out, it was about the loss of her comfort, her space. And that realization only strengthened my resolve. After what felt like an eternity, I cut her off. "Sarah, this conversation is over. Your family's actions brought you to this point. I suggest you focus on finding a solution, instead of wasting your time here." With that, I closed the door, the sound a final note to her symphony of fury. I filed for divorce, my heart heavy but certain. Jake's pleas, his family's insults, all blocked and left behind. I was free, truly free, not just from their physical presence, but from the weight of their disrespect. I started to rebuild, my home once again a sanctuary, my life my own. As days turned into weeks, the memory of them faded, like a bad dream in the morning light. My peace was hard-won, but it was mine, a testament to the strength I never knew I had. And in that peace, I found not just solace, but a profound sense of triumph. I had claimed my life back, one lock, one packed box, one signed paper at a time. And as I stood in my reclaimed space, I knew that this was just the beginning.
Hi, everyone, I'm Kira, and this is my story. Life before the pregnancy was simple and happy. Jack and I would spend evenings talking about our days. He'd share stories about his corporate challenges, and I'd tell him about the school kids' antics. But when I broke the news of the pregnancy, things took a turn I never anticipated. One evening, as Jack walked in, I was setting the table, battling waves of nausea but determined to keep things normal. "Hey, Jack, how was work today?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful. He barely looked up from his phone. Same old, Kira. Deadlines and demands. What's for dinner? I felt a pang of disappointment at his disinterest but brushed it aside. I made your favorite, spaghetti. But, I need to tell you something important. Jack finally looked up, his brow raised. What's up? You look pale. Don't tell me you're sick, we can't afford a doctor's bill right now. The concern in his voice was overshadowed by the hint of irritation. I hesitated but knew I couldn't keep it in any longer. It's not that, Jack. I'm pregnant. For a moment, there was silence. The air felt heavy. Jack's face, usually so full of confidence, went blank. Pregnant? Are you sure, Kira? His voice was a mix of surprise and something else I couldn't quite place. Yes, the tests confirmed it. We're going to have a baby, Jack. I tried to sound excited, hoping my enthusiasm would be contagious. Jack didn't respond. He just stared at the floor, lost in thought. The silence stretched between us, and I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. This wasn't the reaction I'd hoped for. Finally, he looked up, his eyes hard. Kira, you know my job's been on the line with all the cutbacks. And now this? How are we supposed to manage with a baby? Have you thought about that? His words stung. I had imagined joy, hugs, maybe even happy tears. But instead, there was this, a cold, hard dose of reality served by the man I loved. I know, Jack, it's unexpected. But it's also a blessing, isn't it? We can make it work. Maybe I can take some extra tutoring on the side, and... Jack cut me off, his voice rising. Extra tutoring? Kira, you're not thinking straight. A baby is not just about extra expenses for a few months. It's a lifelong commitment. And with your job, how are you going to manage? I recoiled at his tone. This wasn't a discussion, it was a confrontation. My attempt to keep peace shattered like glass under the weight of his words. Jack, please, let's just talk about this calmly. We can make a plan, figure out the finances. But he was already grabbing his coat, his face a mask of frustration and anger. I need some air. We'll talk about this later, Kira. Or better yet, you figure it out. You're the one who's so happy about this blessing. And with that, he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. I stood alone in our small kitchen, the untouched spaghetti cooling on the table, a symbol of our suddenly uncertain future. Weeks had passed since I broke the news to Jack, and each day felt like walking on thin ice. I was doing my best, trying to keep up with my teaching job despite the nausea that hit me without warning. But the day came when my body couldn't keep up, and I had to face the inevitable. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the unpaid leave form from the school in front of me, my hands trembling as I waited for Jack to come home. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet room, each second stretching into eternity. The door finally opened, and Jack walked in, his face buried in his phone. He barely glanced at me as he took off his coat. Jack, we need to talk, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He sighed, a sound of tired irritation. What is it now, Kira? I've had a day from hell at work. Can it wait? I shook my head, feeling the weight of the moment. It's about my job. I can't keep up, not with the baby and my health. I had to take unpaid leave. The words hung in the air, and I watched as Jack's expression turned from annoyance to disbelief, then to anger. Unpaid leave? Are you out of your mind, Kira? How in the hell are we supposed to manage without your salary? Did you even think about that before making this brilliant decision? His voice was rising, each word a sharp jab at my already fragile state. I tried to keep calm, to explain the situation. Jack, please understand. I'm not doing this by choice. The doctor said it's crucial for the baby's health. I'm sick all the time, I can't stand up in front of a class without feeling like I'm going to pass out. What was I supposed to do? But my words seemed to fuel his anger even more. You always have an excuse, don't you, Kira? It's always something with you. First, you bring this surprise pregnancy on me, and now this? What's next? Are you going to tell me you can't even take care of the baby once it's here? His words stung like venom, and I felt tears pricking my eyes. This wasn't the Jack I knew, the man I had married. Jack, please, you're not being fair. I'm doing the best I can. It's not like I'm sitting around, enjoying this. Do you think I like being sick, feeling weak all the time? This is hard for me too, you know. There was a moment of silence as Jack paced the room, his hands clenched into fists, his breathing heavy. You know what, Kira? I'm done. I'm done dealing with this day in, day out. You figure out how to manage your situation, but don't expect me to stand around and watch our lives go down the drain because you can't handle it. I've got my own problems to deal with. The days following our confrontation felt like moving through a thick fog. Jack's presence in the house became like a shadow, barely speaking, his face a mask of cold indifference. I missed the sound of his laughter, the warmth of his touch, but all that seemed like a distant memory now, buried under the weight of our current reality. I was sprawled on the couch, a hand on my belly, trying to find some comfort in the little life growing inside me, when Jack walked in from work. His steps were heavy, the slamming of the door louder than usual. Jack, you're home early, I said, attempting to break the ice that had formed between us. He grunted in response, tossing his keys on the table with a clatter.
Yeah.
Well, not like there's anything better to do. Can't exactly go out with the guys knowing I've got a whole circus to deal with at home. His words were like daggers, and I felt my heart sink. Jack, I don't know what to say anymore. I'm trying here, really trying. But it's like nothing I do is right in your eyes. He let out a dry laugh, void of any humor. Right? Kira, let's not kid ourselves. You lying around all day while I bust my ass at work, that's not trying. That's you taking a vacation at my expense. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the man I married. Vacation? You think this is a vacation for me? Being sick all the time, feeling like I'm a burden to you? This is a nightmare, Jack. I wish you could understand. Jack poured himself a drink, his back turned to me. Understand? Oh, I understand all right. I understand that I'm supposed to be the provider, the protector. But what's the point when the person you're supposed to be protecting doesn't even try to help herself? I tried to sit up, fighting the dizziness that came with the movement. Help myself? How, Jack? Tell me, because I'd love to know. I'm carrying our child, dealing with this sickness every day. What more do you want from me? He downed his drink in one go, the glass hitting the table with a thud. I want a partner, Kira. Someone who stands by me, not someone who adds to the load. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? It's always about you and your problems. Tears blurred my vision, the words choking in my throat. Jack, I'm your wife. Your partner. But it feels like I'm nothing to you now. I'm scared, Jack. Scared of what's happening to us, scared of facing this alone. For a moment, there was silence, the kind that screams louder than words. Then Jack stood up, his figure looming over me. Scared? You're not the only one, Kira. But unlike you, I don't have the luxury of breaking down. I've got to keep it together, for both of us. Because if I don't, who will? The day we had the appointment with Dr. Harris felt like walking into a storm. I knew how important it was for Jack to understand what I was going through, but his reluctance hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. As we sat in Dr. Harris's office, the doctor's gaze was kind but serious. I've asked you both here because it's crucial to understand the reality of Kira's condition. Nausea during pregnancy can be debilitating, and it's not uncommon for it to last throughout the pregnancy. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his chair, a a skeptical smile on his face. Come on, Doc. Are you telling me this nausea thing is real? I mean, people go to work sick all the time. Kira's just taking it easy, right? Dr. Harris's expression didn't change. Jack, this isn't about taking it easy. Pregnancy can significantly impact a woman's body. It's not something one can simply shrug off. Kira's not pretending. This is a serious medical condition that requires support and understanding, especially from her partner. I could feel Jack's impatience growing, his disbelief a tangible force in the room. Seriously, Doc? So, what, I'm supposed to believe that she can't do a thing because of a little morning sickness? I work hard every day. It's not like I can just call in sick whenever I feel like it. Dr. Harris leaned forward, his voice firm. Jack, this isn't a little morning sickness. This is a condition that is affecting Kira's health and well-being. It's not a matter of toughness or endurance. It's a medical reality, and belittling it won't change the facts. I watched as Jack's smirk faded, replaced by a stubborn set to his jaw. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. I don't have time for this. Kira, you're a grown woman. Stop acting like you're the only one who's ever been pregnant. Dr. Harris tried to interject, but Jack was already at the door. I'm sorry, Doc, but I'm not buying it. She's just avoiding work and chores, and now you're telling me to pamper her? That's not happening. And with that, Jack walked out, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Dr. Harris looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. Kira, I'm sorry. But please know, you're not alone in this. We'll find a way to manage your symptoms and get you the support you need. I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. The doctor's office, once a place of reassurance, now felt like the eye of the storm, with the hardest part still to come. The day of the corporate party loomed over us like a dark cloud. I felt a knot in my stomach, knowing that being around so many people, with their perfumes and the food, would be a challenge with my condition. But Jack was insistent. Kira, you have to pull yourself together for this. It's important for my job, for our future, Jack said as he adjusted his tie in front of the mirror. I was sitting on the bed, feeling weak and anxious. Jack, I really don't think I can handle it. The nausea, the smells, it's too much. Can't you go alone this time? Jack turned to me, his expression hard and unyielding. No, Kira. I won't go alone. You need to get over this nonsense and come with me. Everyone's bringing their spouses. What will they think if I show up without you? I tried to reason with him, my voice shaky. It's not nonsense, Jack. You know how bad it's been. I can't control when it hits. What if I get sick at the party? I don't want to embarrass you in front of your colleagues. He let out a harsh laugh, devoid of any real amusement. Embarrass me? Kira, you're already doing that by not going. You think people don't talk? They see you barely leave the house, hear about you not working. Now you want to add to the gossip by making me go to this party alone. The accusation stung, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. That's not fair, Jack. I'm struggling every day. This isn't about gossip, it's about my health, our baby's health. Jack's face softened for a moment, but the hardness quickly returned. Your health? What about my health, Kira? My career? You think I don't have enough on my plate? Now suck it up, get dressed, and let's go. We're already late. Feeling defeated and scared, I slowly got up and started getting ready. The drive to the party was silent, the tension between us thick enough to cut through. As we walked into the building, the noise and the smells hit me like a wave. My stomach churned, and I felt the color drain from my face. Jack was busy greeting his colleagues, a forced smile plastered on his face. Jack, I really don't feel good, I whispered, clutching his arm. He looked at me, annoyance flashing in his eyes. Not now, Kira. Just try to get through the evening. It's important for me. But it was too much. The room started spinning, and I knew I was going to be sick. I tugged at Jack's sleeve, desperation in my voice. Jack, I need to get out of here. Please. That's when it happened. Jack's grip on my arm tightened, and he pulled me away from the crowd, hissing in my ear. You just can't help yourself, can you? Always making a scene. Just go, then. Get out of here if you're going to be like this. He dragged me out into the corridor, his grip bruising my arm. I could barely stand, the nausea overwhelming me. Jack, please, I can't. But he was relentless. With a rough shove, he pushed me towards the exit. Walk home, Kira. And don't you dare come back until you've learned not to embarrass me like this. Leaning against the cool wall of the hallway, I struggled to catch my breath, the taste of humiliation and nausea bitter in my mouth. The bright lights of the party seemed a world away, and in that moment, I felt utterly alone. But then, the sound of approaching footsteps broke through my daze. Ma'am, are you all right? The voice was deep, tinged with genuine concern. I looked up to see an elderly man standing before me, his eyes searching my face for an answer. I tried to muster a response, my words tangled with sobs. I'm not okay. My husband, he just doesn't understand. The man's expression turned stern, yet his voice remained gentle. What's your husband's name, if you don't mind me asking? Between shaky breaths, I managed to utter, Jack. Jack Harrison. A flicker of recognition crossed the man's face, but he quickly masked it with a nod. I see. And why, may I ask, did he leave you out here all alone? The concern in his voice was a balm to my frayed nerves. I found myself confiding in this stranger, telling him about the pregnancy, the nausea, and how Jack had dismissed my struggles and pushed me away. The man listened intently, his jaw tightening with every word I spoke. That's no way for a man to treat his wife, especially in your condition. Jack ought to be ashamed. What kind of partner turns his back on his family when they need him most? His words, spoken with such conviction, stirred something within me, a flicker of hope, a sense of validation I hadn't felt in a long time. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel so lost, I admitted, the weight of my situation pressing down on me. The man placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, his gaze steady and reassuring. You're not alone. Not anymore. Come, let's find you a place to sit down and get some water. You need to take care of yourself, for your sake and your baby's. As we walked to a quieter area, I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for this kind stranger's kindness. We found a secluded table, and he brought over a glass of water, urging me to take small sips. The man then took a seat across from me, his demeanor shifting from compassionate to resolute. I'm going to have a word with Jack. It's high time someone set him straight. No one should treat their partner the way he's treated you tonight. Before I could protest, the man was on his feet, his figure exuding an authority that made me realize he was someone of significance. But more than that, he was someone who saw my pain and chose to stand by me when I felt most vulnerable. It wasn't long before the calm was shattered by a commotion coming from the main hall. Curiosity got the better of me, and I edged closer to see what was happening. There, in the center of the room, stood the elderly man, now commanding the attention of everyone. Beside him was Jack, looking like he wished the ground would swallow him whole. I could barely hear over the murmur of the crowd, but the stern voice of the older man cut through the noise. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you not just as the director of this company but as someone who believes in the core values we all hold dear. It has come to my attention that one of our own has grossly failed to uphold these values in his personal life. The room fell silent, every eye locked on the scene unfolding. Jack's face had turned an ashen color, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. The director continued, his gaze unwavering. Jack Harrison, you have not only let down this company but also the very family you vowed to protect and respect. Mocking your pregnant wife, leaving her in distress, is behavior that I cannot and will not tolerate under any circumstances. I could feel the eyes in the room shifting between Jack and the director, whispers and murmurs filling the space with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Jack finally found his voice, though it was nothing more than a weak stammer. "Sir, you don't understand. Kira, she's just overreacting. She's making it all up. It's not like it sounds." The director's eyes narrowed, his disappointment clear. "Overreacting? Jack, you were seen manhandling your wife, dismissing her health concerns, and leaving her alone and unwell. Is that the kind of man you are? Is that the example you set?" Jack seemed to shrink with every word, his usual bravado fading into nothingness. The crowd was watching, some with open disapproval, others with whispered conversations behind their hands. "Sir, please, I didn't mean for it to. I was just stressed, that's all," Jack pleaded, his voice barely audible. The director shook his head, his decision made. "Stress is no excuse for your behavior, Jack. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties at this company. I will not have someone who exhibits such disregard for their family representing us in any capacity." The finality in the director's voice left no room for argument. Jack stood there, defeated and alone, as the director turned his attention to the crowd. "Let this be a reminder to all of us. Our actions, both in our professional and personal lives, reflect on who we are. Let's strive to be better, to support and respect those around us." As the director stepped down, the room erupted into a low buzz of conversations. Jack made a hasty exit, his fall from grace complete. The days following the party felt surreal, like I was living in a dream, or perhaps finally waking up from a nightmare. The silence in the house was no longer suffocating, it was peaceful, a space for me to breathe and gather my thoughts. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, I watched the early morning sun paint the room with a gentle light. It was then that the doorbell rang, a sound that once would have sent a jolt of anxiety through me. But not today. Today, I felt a strange sense of calm. I opened the door to find Jack's director standing there, his face somber yet kind. "Kira, may I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "Of course, please." As we sat at the table, the director folded his hands, his gaze meeting mine. "I wanted to check on you, after everything that happened. And to talk about what comes next." I took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling in my heart. "Thank you. It's been a lot to process. But I feel like it's time to move forward, to make some changes." The director nodded, a look of understanding in his eyes. "That's a good mindset to have. And you won't be alone in this. The company has a support system for situations like these. We can offer counseling, legal advice if you need it, and financial support, especially with the baby on the way." The kindness in his offer brought tears to my eyes. I don't know what to say. "Thank you. This means so much to me." He offered a gentle smile. "It's the least we can do. No one should go through what you've been through alone. And as for Jack, he's been given the resources to seek help too. It's up to him to decide what to do with them." I nodded, a sense of closure washing over me. Jack's path was his to choose, but mine was clear now. It was time to rebuild, to create a new life for myself and my baby. The director stood, placing a business card on the table. "If you need anything at all, you call this number. We're here for you, Kira." After he left, I looked around the quiet house, the walls echoing with the promise of a new beginning. I picked up the business card, running my fingers over the embossed letters. It was more than just a piece of paper, it was a lifeline, a symbol of hope. I took a sip of my tea, the warmth spreading through me. With the support of people who cared and the strength I had found within myself, I knew I could create a brighter future, a new dawn not just for me, but for the little life growing inside me. And as I watched the sun climb higher into the sky, I realized that this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning.